And then
One of
the
the things I love about this story is it points out that we can all become better communicators, and that no matter what level communicator we are, whether we're like stumbling over our words or whether we're already pretty good, there's always a next level. And it's a skill. It's like going to the gym. You don't just go to the gym and get in shape once and you're done. Communication requires ongoing commitment to excellence. And like you said, learning from books, learning from videos, practicing, whether it's Toastmasters, you want to do a TEDx talk, or you're practicing to be on television, or you're practicing to be a host, whatever the case may be. That's one of the things I really loved about the Toastmaster story. I had the privilege of reading an advance review copy of your forthcoming book, Billion Dollar Communication Skills. And one of the things I loved about your Toastmaster story in your book was just how sharp the contrast was from the first time that you went and you're like, no, don't talk to me, I'm going to crawl out of here, to
Mm.
embracing it, leaning into it, learning, and getting, in fact, the highest level of qualification and acknowledgement for your skills at the end. So that just shows anybody who's listening, no matter where you are on the communication spectrum, you can improve.
Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us around the world and saying, okay, we know where Canada is, in British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And Prince George, then where is Prince George? Well, we got this big city called Vancouver. We are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers, which puts us in the center of British Columbia, north, south, east, and west. And Prince George is a beautiful community, lots of trees, lots of lakes. Within 50 miles, we got 100 lakes. We got lots of friends here. We got black bears, grizzly bears, we got caribou, we got deer, we got wolves, we got foxes, we got them all here. We call it paradise. Now, today, a very, very special podcast is Aurora Winter. I've had her on my podcast before, and Aurora is a creative entrepreneur who has built several seven-figure companies and has been featured on TV and radio podcasting. Aurora has been also is an author, and one of the books that she wrote, I'm gonna hold it up, is one of my favorite ones here. And so, Turn Words into Wealth. Very, very interesting title. And she's writing, had written several other ones, is working on some other ones, and she will talk to us about that. She was on my podcast in 2024, our episode 321. This one is 405. And so the other part about Aurora is that she believes that communication is the foundation of everything that we do. It is for me as well, and I agree with that. Yet, it is an area where people often are struggling to be effective, not well taught, actually. And, and we will be talking about that in particular, drawing inspiration from Stephen Jobs, who spent 3 weeks designing, practicing, and perfecting the Apple launching. Aurora highlights the power of words in driving success. Aurora, welcome to the show.
It's great to be on the show with you again, John. And I know you and I both love communication and believe that it's the biggest gift we can give to others.
There is no question about, and it's the foundation in a lot of cases of other people that have become very, very successful. Let's talk about yourself a bit and your background and your history. Why did this become so important to you? And how did you become an author? And you have done several presentations, you have written a number of books, but writing books is not easy. It is in fact a real challenge, but very rewarding once you start the process. So tell us about your education, your background. How did you get there? How did you get forward? And how did you get to where you are today? And then particularly how you got to our interaction here and talking about your books as well as mine.
Yeah, I love communication, and I think it's the biggest gift we can give to others because so often the message that is sent is not the message that is received. So I break that down in my book, Turn Words into Wealth. My background is as a film and television executive producer. You know, we're both Canadians, and so you will be familiar perhaps with the film industry in Canada and in Toronto. I was head of development for a company at the time called Atlantis Films. I had a $1.5 million development budget, which was just for the scripts. And I love movies. I love television. I love all kinds of communication. But the problem with the film business is you need millions of dollars to make a movie, and you can get stuck in development hell. So I fell in love with books, with authorship, because today anyone can write a book. And if they have something important and valuable to share, they can share it with the world on Amazon and other platforms. And that's just so empowering and exciting to me. I mean, you're a great example of that. You've written a number of books and you have touched and inspired and uplifted people by sharing your story. And I just love that. Now, maybe you're going to make a feature film at some point about your life. I think that would be worthwhile, but that takes millions of dollars. And in the meantime, people can read your books.
And then the other part about it, Aurora, is obviously both of us are also very involved in podcasting. And
Yes.
podcasting, relatively new. If I look back 5, 6, 7 years ago, when I first started, mainly on blogging initially, and then from there on in it transited to dealing with the local television provider, Shaw at the time, which is now called Rogers. We did it on a local basis, talking to people that were interesting, and so interviewing them more or less, and then that went well, and then COVID happened. And all of a sudden, we couldn't go in the television station anymore, and everything changed. And so then we said, what do we do now? So we had this apartment in downtown Prince George and said, well, let's build a studio. And we did, and that's the one that I'm sitting in now. And so we started from there, interviewing, again, regional and local individuals that were very interesting. It became quite popular. And then it became a question of, how do I find more individuals? Although we have lots of them here, and so I considered maybe set up another studio in Vancouver. I have an apartment in Yaletown, downtown Vancouver, and there's a whole lot of people there potentially. And so, but then the more I looked at television, in particular CNN, ABC, and all the stations that we're so familiar with, then the more we saw the idea interviewing 1, 2, 3 different people, all kinds of different places on the world, and saying, maybe virtual is the direction that we should go to complement local or regional interviews. And so we then signed up with an organization called PodMatch. And PodMatch basically identifies people from around the world that are interested in podcasting and finding, either being a host or a guest, and finding similarities between people. So that became a niche started by Alex from PodMatch, became very, very successful. We signed up. And so today we obviously have done your podcast number 405, where I'm hosting. And I've been also a guest on probably another 200 or so. We're the top 1%. We're approaching 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Immensely powerful, because once we know and since our conversation is about communication, is that I can say without being bragging about it, that if we have close to 1 million subscribers on YouTube, we probably have on the other platforms at least another million. It could well be that our conversation and many of the others that we do are being seen by a couple of million people around the world.
Exactly.
Immensely powerful and still expanding.
And actually, you've been such an inspiration to me. Mentioning Podmatch, I think that's how your team first found me and we first connected for the first interview. Podmatch is great, but you have been an inspiration to me. It's been so fun watching your channel just over the past couple of months, growing like 100,000 subscribers every month. You're very close to 1 million. And that, as you said, is just on YouTube. So you inspired me to start a YouTube channel called Strategic Basics. And they're just short 7-minute interviews where I talk about the breaking news stories and then pull the curtain back to see, well, what are the principles behind this that could be useful for authors, experts, and entrepreneurs? So, one of the stories, for example, is about Mel Robbins, how she had a little 45-second video clip on her social media. It blew up, it got millions of views. So that's great. But the teachable moment for entrepreneurs and thought leaders like ourselves and the people watching is pay attention to what people are responding to and then do more of that. So Mel Robbins doubled down on this let them idea. She did a podcast about it, she did several more videos about it. And now she has launched the book, The Let Them Theory, which last time I checked was selling about a $5 million a month, including the audiobook, and
Oh
it's on
my.
track perhaps to be the number one nonfiction book this year. So that's a taste of what Strategic Basics is about. It's breaking news stories and then the teachable moments for thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts behind the news.
So the other part interesting about this, Aurora, is that so at 84 and a half years young, I'm always kind of looking forward, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And then I still, since I'm trying to get to 120, so I always look forward the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, where will it all go? And in particular to writing, I'm still working on 2 other books, and one of them that will come out in July, and I know you're going to talk about that one a little bit, is but at the same time, what I'm doing is saying with podcasting, I want to set up a platform where we can start looking globally on all those issues that people have found interesting, at least up to this point of my podcast in particular, taking an approach, talking about daily things that people encounter, whatever that may be. It may be neurodiversities, ADHD, dyslexia, but communication skills, teaching, and basically exploring with me, which I did in my life, is the question, who am I? And then the other one is that any of the presentation I do to younger people in particular that say, well, this is not right, that's not right, I don't look good. I say, always remember, there's only one of you on this whole earth, and
Yeah.
you are special. Not better than, but special. So rather than being preoccupied about, do I look right? Is this right? Is that right? Is say, focus on accepting the fact that you are special.
Well, you're such an empowering voice, and you're also a Renaissance man. You know, I've had the pleasure of reading your books, and you talk about everything from entrepreneurship to overcoming ADHD. And now I'm excited about your upcoming new book. But before we get into that, I'm curious about your strategy because, you know, launching this channel, Strategic Basics. Why do you think it's an important strategy for you to have basically published a book every year and to also have this platform that you're reaching millions of people on through the podcasting?
Very good question, Aurora. Is that, as you know from I was born in 1940 during the Second World War, left an impact on me. The inner child was something that I got counseling for in my 50s, and then PTSD as a result of seeing far too much that I shouldn't have. And then the other part about me was that academically I was not a success story. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and everybody said to my parents after the third time I failed grade 7, what are we going to do with this guy? Now, my parents were beautiful people, and a lot of people said, send him to the mentally challenged school. Fortunately, they did say no. We'll get him a job. And then my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad was in lumber. And so they said, well, maybe what we do is send him to a furniture factory at 12 and a half years old, and then he becomes a furniture maker. And I liked that, so although a lot of my friends, kind of look down on me because all those that went to college, university, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then, it was a bit of a challenge, and I turned inward, became an introvert, likely living in my own world, knowing that I was just as good as anybody else, but I felt I had to start anew from the beginning. And so we were liberated by the Canadian Army, and somewhat special April for me, because it was on April the 12th, 1945, we were liberated by the Canadian Army, and it made such an impression on me that I knew as I grew up I would go to the land of my heroes. Now, the other part was that I always believed that I was just as smart as everybody else, but I had to start anew. Because in Holland, no matter what you do, you get married, or you get a job someplace, or you get, can you imagine, entrepreneurship or anything like that. The question was always, what kind of diplomas do you have? Well, I didn't have diplomas. And so then going to Canada became my way, and it was my dream to start anew. And then the other one was to build my own lumber mill and start with nothing. And so I couldn't speak language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. So I flew into Montreal in July of 1965, took the train across Canada. 4 days, 5 nights. Can you believe? That is a long way. Landed in Vancouver, went to the immigration department. Fortunately, there was a German fellow. Told them what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, that's where you go. So I could still see here from a couple of blocks down where the Greyhound station was, where I landed with my book and my suitcase. And I had 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. But wow. What I did have is always a positive attitude in my own little world, and then even still today, but I avoid negative. Don't even come close to me. And then passion, I give whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic, I work harder than anybody. And and I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so, and every time I drive around or fly around, which I do a lot of, like at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going to fly to North Saanich, where we have a place just to get me away from. Otherwise, I'd be at my operation 7 days a week, 24 hours a day if I could. And so, but if I fly around, I look around, I say we are in paradise. And I can appreciate it because I have seen and lived the other part. And some people think that the war years, that once the war is over, everything goes back to normal. Well, it doesn't. It can stay for generations to be a challenge. So and so I saw that in my family. So I appreciate how lucky, how fortunate we are in North America.
Well, you're such an inspiration to people because, wow, I mean, you started with nothing, well, $25.47. you didn't speak English. You were from Holland. You were, later in life diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. You had all kinds of communication challenges. And yet, fast forward, you built multiple super successful businesses. You're a thought leader. And now you're reaching, I think your videos have been watched by 25 million people. So, like, tell us about the middle. How did you go from somebody who had challenges communicating to somebody who's got the top ranking in Toastmasters? Give us a little taste of how you managed to do that, John.
So when I came, obviously in 1965, I didn't speak the language. I didn't know a soul. I didn't have any family here and no work. So I went to an office here, and they found me a job as a cleanup man in a lumber mill. But when I was a cleanup man, working in my suit for all intents and purposes, I was the joke around the mill, and everybody, it was not only a sawmill, it was also a plywood plant. There must have been 200 people on the shift, and everybody came down to the lumber mill because there they had this guy in his suit piling lumber on the green check. And they said, "Oh my God, can you believe this guy?" Whatever, right? So, but a lot of people did not understand. I already was building my mill then. I knew it was not if, but when, and when couldn't come quick enough. So the more I had to learn as to how does the industry work, what does it look like, and so that became the objective. Then fairly quickly I became aware of another mill that was being built here and became one of the biggest mills in the Prince George region. Started as a lumber parlor, then from there green chain foreman, then sawmill foreman, then superintendent. Even that part didn't go quick enough for me. And then there was an opportunity, and as I then developed my skill sets to interact, the other part that was very, very interesting is that an opportunity arose in a little sawmill that needed a manager, and so he invited me to become a manager, and within 5 years I would get part ownership in that sawmill. So the question would be where was it, John? It was in the Yukon Territory, right next to Alaska. And the Yukon Territory. A lot of people ask me about Holland. They say, "What is the climate like?" I said, "Well, the difference between winter and summer is the rain is colder in the wintertime." Now, Watson Lake, next to Alaska, I've seen it snow in July, so you didn't know it was late or early. I've seen it 62 below zero, and it is likely the best place to learn to water ski on Watson Lake, because you knew, and there was only 1 or 2 months that there was no ice, that if you were water skiing, if you fell off, you'd probably die the instant you hit the water. That's how cold it was. So your toes go like this. So
you had a big incentive not to fall.
You
Oh
didn't
my
want to
gosh.
fall. And then
Oh
from
my
there,
gosh.
and then as I developed the communications better, but it's difficult, to learn to become an effective communicator, and at starting up from the bottom, but interacting is helpful. Watching television, reading books and stuff, So then, in 1990, I still had issues being an introvert, and although my businesses already were successful, and everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful," I didn't feel that way. And so then, hence, as you already indicated, an ex-sister-in-law that I had didn't drag me, but encouraged me to go to an organization called, as you refer to, Toastmasters, which specializes in developing communication skills. In particular, what it does is, the first meeting that I went to, I said, "Are you going to ask me any questions? Because if they do, I'm not going." He said, "No, don't worry about it. Just sit there and listen." So in the middle of the meeting, they said, "Hey, John, tell us all." I said, "Oh my God, I'll never go back here." I did. I stayed for 10 years. And so an amazing organization for people watching us. It's active in North America, but also in other parts of Europe and other places. It, every city, every town has a number of these clubs. And the focus is, and people ask me, what is Toastmasters all about? I said, first and foremost, become a good listener. And the second one is speak on your feet. Learn to articulate comments and questions, answers to that as you stand on your feet. And then the other part is prepare presentations. And people say, what does a presentation look like? A lot of times I say, the presentation is tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So that's the opening, the body, and then more or less the finish. And
That's a good recipe.
And so I did that for about 10 years, and still I believe that part of my life, the 10 years changed me. And then
One of the things I love about this story is it points out that we can all become better communicators, and that no matter what level communicator we are, whether we're like stumbling over our words or whether we're already pretty good, there's always a next level. And it's a skill. It's like going to the gym. You don't just go to the gym and get in shape once and you're done. Communication requires ongoing commitment to excellence. And like you said, learning from books, learning from videos, practicing, whether it's Toastmasters, you want to do a TEDx talk, or you're practicing to be on television, or you're practicing to be a host, whatever the case may be. That's one of the things I really loved about the Toastmaster story. I had the privilege of reading an advance review copy of your forthcoming book, Billion Dollar Communication Skills. And one of the things I loved about your Toastmaster story in your book was just how sharp the contrast was from the first time that you went. And you're like, no, don't talk to me. I'm going to crawl out of here, to embracing it, leaning into it, learning, and getting, in fact, the highest level of qualification and acknowledgement for your skills at the end. So that just shows anybody who's listening, no matter where you are on the communication spectrum, you can improve.
So what became important to me, Aurora, is that as I did with all my books, and so the first one that I did is a lot of people said to me, years ago, "Hey, John, you have such an interesting life. You should write a book about it." And I thought about it, but writing books, as you know, it's not easy. And so then, I started and I stopped. I started and stopped, and then I knew about 6, 7 years ago that if I don't do it now, it will never happen. And so I did, and so I took, and I wrote this one, Against All Odds. And that's not about how successful John is, but just the contrary, going through all the ups and downs. It took me
the hero's journey. It's a great book. I've read it.
80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And I did it for that purpose. And as I did with the other books that I did, I'm going to show you the other one, ADHD Unlocked. And
I know that's changed many lives.
Changed many lives. And then the other ones is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And so finding a job or a career choice that you like, because you're going to be doing that for a long time. And the delicate part about that is that I saw it on a U.S. television station, that 75% of the people they interviewed do not like their job. And I bet you it's the same in Canada. And 70% of that 75% are looking for another job. So if I give presentations to young people in particular in schools, I always say to them, what do you want to do after you finish with your education? They say, I don't know. I said, respectfully, I said, the more idea you get of what direction you like, because it will affect your whole life. You're going to be a truck
Yeah.
driver, talk to a truck driver. See what they do. Should I own it? Should I do this? Blah, blah, blah. Or you want to be a contractor, talk to contractors. They love to talk to you. Or you want to be a lawyer, talk to lawyers. They like and tell them, okay, just an interview. Don't charge me. But no, I'm just joking. But they love to talk to you. Or you want to be an accountant, or for that matter, an entrepreneur. And a lot of entrepreneurs like myself like to
Exactly right.
talk. Yeah. And then at least, so that's why I wrote this book, Find Your Passion, Living the Dream. And for me, that started working when I was 12 and a half. I'm now nearly 85. So for 72 years, I've been working. And so a fair question would be, are you living the dream, John? I am, every day looking forwards. That's how important it is. It affects your life. And the other one that I did is Living Young, Dying Old. Picture of me, actually, is that
I know you're a competitive bodybuilder in your 80s, which is amazing. And you have so many messages about health and vitality. And then your next book, Billion Dollar Communication Skills. Why did you decide to write that one next?
and that's why I showed you all the other books, because they all are basic and foundation pieces for me, what I've learned and what made me, at the risk of sounding like egoistic maybe a little bit, but I have been successful. And what made me successful is that I feel that there are so many people that have so many challenges, not unsimilar to the ones that I want to, lack of self-confidence or other situations where they move from one part of the earth to another one, looking for, how do I find the things that I want to do, and where are the opportunities? How do I go about it? So that's what I wrote the books about. And then the other one, critically important to me, is communication skills. And I
Yeah.
felt that it was necessary for me to write about that in terms of what happened to me, under which circumstance, and how did it make me successful as a communicator, especially taking in fact that when I grew up in northeastern Holland, we spoke dialect, not High
Hmm.
Dutch, dialect. And so when I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force when I was 18, I had to learn to speak High Dutch, different from dialect. And a lot of people can understand it and say, oh, he speaks dialects, farmer, blah, 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 that kind of a thing. So I got beyond that, and I barely got High Dutch under control. Then I moved to Canada, and I'd start all over again to speak English and become in my mid-20s. And so then what helped me there is that obviously Toastmasters brought me to a whole new level and opened the door. And if I look back, sharing with others that have challenges, not only through my podcasting, but also through my books, I felt that communication skills was critically important, that I can write about it from my perspective under the worst of circumstances, go all the way to the other side of the world and become an effective communicator. And not only that, is that to start writing about it became very, very important to me.
Not many people can claim that whole journey, from the very beginning where you were told that maybe you had learning difficulties, which obviously is not true. You're obviously very intelligent, but ADHD and dyslexia, and then language issues, and then moving to a country where you didn't know anybody and didn't have any money. Well, you had $25.47, basically starting with nothing, starting all over, and then to launch multiple successful businesses. So I love that you're talking about communication. That's my experience too as an entrepreneur. I feel like I've been in multiple different businesses. I've been in the television business and the yacht business, selling boats as tax shelters, and coach training business. I'm in the publishing business. And when people say, "Well, you did all these different things, what's the common thread?" The common thread is communication. The common thread is solving a problem, but communicating what the problem is and how you solve it That is the key to any entrepreneur's success. And so I'd love if you could give us a little bit of a taste of why you think communication has helped you build your business or businesses.
So it started even when I already was successful in building businesses. So I had the skill sets, but what was lacking likely is communication skills, but more importantly, self-confidence in terms
Mm,
of I I struggled with who am I? And that came partially through my history in Holland during the war years, and then obviously then academically, failing grade 3, failing grade 7 3 times, and where people are hard on each other, and
yes, especially kids.
especially kids. And in Holland, if you did a document that, or you had a test that you did, then they rated it from 0 being the lowest, 10 to the highest, and then it was fairly standard in our class that they would go through it and they named them all, blah blah blah, as an 8, and blah 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 as a 9, and wow, and this one as a 10, and John Brink as usual a 0. and,
Oh,
and so and so then obviously being dumb, being stupid, never will amount to anything. I knew that wasn't so, but in the meantime, uh, what became difficult for me, in particular, even in Holland already, having that self-confidence, the starting over again became important. But really what changed it all is that at a number of occasions, and I relate to that in the book, where I was very good in numbers, always in school, better than
hmm,
most, and I was a good writer, but not a reader because of dyslexia.
right.
Both of ADHD and dyslexia are still very much part of me today, and but obviously I got beyond that, and being able to, if I did a presentation, Aurora, and I had, as many other people do, read the document of the presentation, I would not be good at that because I'm simply not very good at reading. Is the
But you're very
words.
good at listening, which is why you're a great leader, a manager, and a podcast host. One of the things that stood out to me from what you just shared, you were talking about self confidence and lacking self confidence earlier in your life. And then a little bit ago, you also talked about helping other people with self confidence. And you talked about, being dressed in a suit when you were sweeping up. And so I wanted to ask you about self talk because before we communicate with others, we talk to ourselves. And when we are feeling less than or we're feeling wobbly about our self confidence, our self talk is not very empowering. But your self talk must have been very powerful when you chose to dress in a suit when you were sweeping up sawdust and when it couldn't go fast enough because you already saw yourself building your businesses. You already saw yourself beyond where you were. So there were two different times in your life, sometimes where you had probably disempowering self-talk and other times when you had empowering self-talk. I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Yes, and that again is very important. So I knew when I left, I had to start from the bottom, simply because I didn't have the diplomas. And then I wanted to start with nothing. So one suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and then we had the companies that I worked for in Holland, and my dad had some contacts here. I didn't want to use those. And with some of the larger forest company, I didn't want to use. I wanted to start from the bottom, and so that when I came to Prince George and got then a job as a cleanup man in a lumber piler, is that I didn't have working clothes, so I wanted to work, and that's all I had on: my gray pants, my raincoat, my black double-breasted jacket, and a white shirt and a tie. And that's how I was piling lumber because I didn't have any other clothes. So because they found me a job, in a local mill, but I had to start that same evening. So I arrived here in the morning on the Greyhound, and that same evening I was piling lumber in my suit. And so
Wow.
and everybody came, looked at me, and then people are not nice. They try to bury you in the lumber that you can't have enough physical time or ability to pile it all. But I was very
Oh,
good, and so that would not happen. I always say I took my tie off after the first coffee break, and so I was looking always forward to where I
yes.
would go. At nights when I would go home, I started designing from what I knew about mills, sawmills here, as to what my mill should look like. And then I already had my logo, Brink Forest Products Ltd, as part of it. And I already did that mentally. It was just not if, but when, and when couldn't come quick enough. But I had to
Yeah.
learn the industry here. I had to learn to understand and speak English, but I still did not have that confidence, even not then, until some of these other things happened. And then fairly quickly, within a year and a half, I was the superintendent. And then within 10 years after being here, I started my company now 50 years ago with 3 employees. And then from there and then expanded into, I think we have 10 different companies now and a number of other
And how
things
many
that are,
employees do you have now?
well, normally around between 400 and 500 in that area.
So 100 times more than the three
Yes.
that you started out with.
Yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
exactly.
One of
That's
the
it.
things I loved, as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to read an advance review copy of Billion Dollar Communication Skills, and there's some great stories in there. Um, you mentioned at the top of this interview about Steve Jobs as being a really great example of the value of communication. He practiced for 3 weeks before doing an Apple launch, and I put that in the book, Turn Words into Wealth, which you kindly appreciated and acknowledged. And in your book, Billion Dollar Communication Skills, there's many stories, but one of them, for example, is about William Randolph Hearst. I wonder if you would comment about Hearst and your opinion of him.
Yeah, so I wrote about quite a few of them in there, in particular, as you said, the Jobs was a good example, and then some of the other ones. I felt it was important for me in writing the book to show my experience, what it meant for me, why it was so important, and then once I became involved in the communications. Skills of Toastmasters, it opened the door more for me, and then it became even more important in terms of making presentations, not only in my own environment, but beyond that. And then as I wrote the book, in particular showing that experience and then talking about the different individuals that I found interesting, is that, including Hearst, is that they were all successful in what they did, but it took them a long time to get there, and they all came through that difficult period where in some cases they nearly failed, started up again, and stayed the course. But their communication skills that they developed became the key to their success. And the reason that I called the book, as it is behind me, $1 billion communication skills, is that really is the foundation to all of them. And then the other misconception that some people have is that the reason that I called it $1 billion is not the book to how to acquire $1 billion, but saying that's what they acquired in the process And this is who they were before it started. And the other part about that is that a lot of people have the misconception that the most satisfying period towards success is that the difficult period of growing slowly forward, down again, forward, forward, down again. And so that then became the foundation. And the hardest thing is towards success is to get that first maybe $10,000.
Yeah, the
And
beginning is so hard.
it's so hard to get there. And then in this particular book, saying to get to that $1,000,000 is the most difficult part. The other part of it is less difficult. And then
I think
the
it's harder
other,
to go from 10,000 to 100,000 than from 100,000 to a million. And then from a million to a billion, you can float that way. But I
and
don't
then,
think there's a single example of a self-made billionaire who didn't have extraordinary communications.
and that's why I'm sharing that with them as well. But the other part about it is interesting, is that, and I say that respectfully, that from my experience, I've known and know a lot of people that are very, very wealthy. And it does not mean that happiness, the more money you have, the happier you will be. That's not so. And from my experience, in fact, the contrary is in a lot of cases the case. Is that people
I think
that have,
happiness comes, pardon me? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
yes. So what I'm
I think
saying is, yeah, go ahead.
happiness comes from pursuit of something meaningful. It's not from actually getting there, it's from the journey. Happiness comes from a meaningful journey. And
And
you've certainly been on a meaningful journey.
And so the challenge is that how do you preserve that even of times where you already become successful? How can you then, in my case in particular, how can you make it still exciting? And so that's still what I do today, still trying to change our businesses. We have four silos. The one is lumber manufacturing, the other one is warehousing, the other one is real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial. And the other one, exciting one, is media. And one of the challenges, and that is making presentation to others. And I do that selectively because in a lot of cases it takes a lot of travel, as you well know. That if I do presentations in the United States, a lot of times it takes me 2 days to get
Yeah.
there, make the presentation, come back. And there, obviously, with media now, podcasting has become a very, very strong vehicle. And at the same time, what it allows me to do is share with others, as we're doing now, talking about some of our presentations that we are doing, you are doing as well. And what got my excited about it is your book that you shared with me, Turn Words into Wealth, and also again focusing on communications. Is that how can you keep things active and attractive? And your life has not been easy. You've gone through all the ups and downs, and
I certainly
including,
have, especially after my husband died suddenly when he was only 33 and our son was 4. But
yeah.
what I think we're both on the journey of is trying to contribute to the world at large through sharing our setbacks, the things that didn't work for us, the things that did work, and helping other people achieve their goals with a little bit more grace and ease and clarity. And I think books are the greatest way to do that because books are like seeds. They can germinate when somebody reads it. And so the book sits on the library shelf or the bookstore shelf like a seed. And even after the author has passed on. I've been mentored by great leaders and authors and mentors like C.S. Lewis. His book uh, changed me when I was 9 years old, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That made me decide to be a writer. And yet he was dead. And you can read so many great books. So I feel like I think we are both in our different ways working on leaving a legacy. And I really enjoyed reading Billion Dollar Communication Skills. Thanks for letting me read the advanced reader copy. I think that's really going to help many people see, hey, if John can do it with all of those challenges, ADHD, dyslexia, doesn't speak English, only $25.47, if he can succeed as a great communicator, there's hope for me. So they read your
And,
book, I'm sure they'll be really
and then
inspired.
the other part about it, Aurora, is, and that I said it a little bit tongue in cheek. A lot of people say to me, "Hey, John, there's any time that somebody mentions to you about you and you make a presentation and you said you failed grade 7 3 times, does that still bother you?" I said, "It does immensely, actually. I should have left earlier."
Exactly right.
So the point that I'm simply making is that education does not mean formal education, which has challenges still. And I'm supportive of education, obviously, but I think that we are not taking enough investment, if you wish, or attention to neurodiversity issues that could help a person like with me, ADHD, dyslexia, that was not even considered when in the early
No,
50s or in the late 40s. They didn't even know you were dumb and stupid. You probably will never amount to anything, so.
and thank
And
God we've changed our attitude about that. One of the things that stood out to me about your story, you had two suits of clothes and you had three books. And I was curious what those three books were.
I'm glad you asked me
But
that.
that shows your commitment to learning that you took three books with you.
So the one book was Management by Drucker, and
Ah,
in Dutch, and Drucker, very, very well known as an author, and especially as it addresses management. The other one was Logical Thinking, also in Dutch, and then the other one was about Canada. And so what I
wow.
did, Aurora, from an early age, even when I already was working as a laborer, more or less, if there were any presentations that were made by successful individuals, I went out of my way to either listen to them or go physically there and see what made these people click, what made them so, if you wish, so successful. And
Yeah,
and
so
so
you've been a lifelong student, really, of success and communication. Quick little story. My grandfather, when he came from England to Canada, he had the Farmer's Almanac with him.
yeah.
And that, carrying a book that had knowledge was the same thing that you did. And that actually got him his first job in the Great Depression. He got a job because he had the Farmer's Almanac and was recognized as somebody who had expertise in that area.
And so what I'm saying is this, Aurora, then if I left something with anybody, is that saying, what is my foundation is, although it took me a long time to discover who am I and to know that everybody is special because there's only one of you. And then the other part, the other part is attitude, passion, work ethic, but will follow is success. And
Hmm.
so, so when I go around and I look around where we are in North America, including the United States, including Canada, do a lot of business in the United States. I know you do as well. You do a lot of traveling through North America. If I fly around, I look out, I always sit by the window and I look outside and it says paradise. And the
Yeah.
reason that I say that is because I've seen the other side. I saw it, what it did to families. I saw what happens if people get killed and people are getting dragged out of their houses, never to return. I've seen that. I've seen what happened to our family as a result of war. And so where my dad was drafted into the Dutch army, and for 5 years we didn't know if he was dead or alive. And
Oh,
when he came back, he had a helmet with a bullet had gone through it on the one side and out of the other, missed his head by less than a quarter of an inch. And so, but he was never the same again after that, never talked about it. So I've seen that, and I know now, looking at the Ukraine, looking at the Middle East, looking at China, looking at Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea, and so I admire what we have, and democratic rule is the foundation, and especially if I remember the liberation of Europe and the landing in Normandy of the Allied forces, the U.S., Canada, Britain in particular, that helped the freedom, and then followed by the Marshall Plan in 1947, rebuild. I would hope that even now, although there are challenges politically around North America, that the foundation and the United States in particular is the picture of democratic rule, and the foundation is we the people is the foundation, not I the dictator, hopefully. And that is the foundation. That will remain, although we go up and down there as well, two challenges, but that I believe will remain, and it makes us so fortunate living in North America in this time. And then at the same
absolutely.
time, as you and I do, is that from the challenges we have had along the way, to be able to write about it in your book. What is the next one that you're working on, you're releasing?
I'm working on a book called Strategic Basics, and that's really fun because I'm posting videos on YouTube. So I know people love audiobooks. The audiobook industry is $9 billion right now. It's forecast to be $30 billion in 2030. But I'm like, what's after audiobooks? I'm like, video books. So what I'm doing is each chapter that I write, it's posted as a video on YouTube on the Strategic Basics channel. And then I'm also turning it into a book. So it'll be a book, an audiobook, and a video book. So I don't think anybody's done that before. It's kind of fun for me to do
You
something new.
kind of covered all the bases there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for all, have you got a website that people can get in contact with you and
Sure.
looking
They
at your
can go to
books?
same, thank you. They can go to samepagepublishing.com, samepagepublishing.com to find out all about me. My books are on Amazon, or they can check out the YouTube channel at Strategic Basics.
And then for all the people watching us that want to see podcasts like we are doing, and keep the variety of podcasting that we are doing, and as well as Aurora Winter is doing, that subscribe to our podcast because it encourages us to do more. Share it with others, and comment on it, then so that's important for us.
And watch John's other videos. I really loved your World War II Holland video that you just released. It was so moving. It's very short, but it brought tears to my eyes because it was like, wow, we just take for granted being in peace, and not everybody in the world is in peace. So I think that was a very, very important video that you launched.
Yeah, thank you, Aurora. Because the time of being liberated physically in northern Holland, northeastern Holland, April the 12th, 1945, the next date, that's why the period April the 12th to May the 5th is when officially Germany, gave in to that they were defeated, is a very important date in Holland, the liberation. And then to me, what is also always important is November the 11th, when we remember Remembrance Day. And what I usually try to do, or do, and have done for the last 12 years, I speak to at least 3 or 4 schools in British Columbia and other places, if I can, about what does it mean to me that was there, and what does it mean, the 2 minutes of silence. And those presentations are very, very important for me. There are not many people left now that were there and remember, and I believe that's important, and I feel it as an obligation to still share that with others.
Absolutely.
Aurora, it was a pleasure to have you on my podcast, and we'll stay in touch, obviously, and
Thank you, John.
and I'll have you on again on your podcast once you. When are you releasing your next book?
It's coming out this fall.
This fall. Okay, we'll have you on the podcast again and we'll talk about your book.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Aurora, take care. Bye bye.